I want to thank Sarah for a great introduction. She basically described my career and all the mistakes I made so far. I wrote some legacy code. It's called LabVIEW. Let's see. Everybody hear me okay? I turned the volume down just a little bit. Better? Is this good? Can you hear me? Okay. Let's see. Big thank you to Jeremy and Sarah for organizing this thing. So they didn't give a shout out to themselves, but big shout out for another announcement is Norm's birthday yesterday, so happy birthday, Norm. Let's see, and also get out, this is going to be an interactive presentation, so get out your phones or laptops to get either some text messages or get on the internet or something, so that will be coming up shortly. Who am I? I'm Brian Powell. How many people don't know who I am? Okay, good, that's about what I expected. I used to work at a place called National Instruments, worked there for 26 years, worked on the LabVIEW team. At least one of my contemporaries is in the back of the room. I did a variety of things at NI, mostly in LabVIEW R&D, but also field architects with Nancy, wherever Nancy is, and LabVIEw robotics and 64-bit LabVIEw, a whole bunch of things that I did. Then I left NI in 2014 and I started working in healthcare, not in the LabVIEW world, just was director of engineering at a company called Athena Health, big Boston-based company with a small Austin office. And did that for about 4 years. I have stories, some of them you'll hear today. And that was interesting. And then I worked at a local Austin startup for the last year and a half until earlier this year as VP of engineering for 100-person startup. In the car insurance world. Bunch of stories there too. You'll hear some of those. And then I decided to start my own consulting company back in, I don't know, April or May. Just kind of decided it was time to if I was ever going to do it, I should do it. So I did it. And I've been working on that ever since, trying to get it off the ground, working with a few customers and teaching some courses, things like that. So that's kind of where I came from. So it's kind of been an interesting 5 years on the outside in the last few years. It's also interesting to come back into the LabVIEW world in the last few months and kind of see there's a lot of things that haven't changed and then there's a few things that have. So especially as VP of engineering, I have a lot of thoughts about what it takes to get, in my case, like 60 developers all heading in the same direction. So that's kind of where what this presentation is about. But first, for those that aren't familiar with our Giants Are Female, it was started with a blog post that Fabiola did a couple of years ago, I guess. And so I like to include a slide that highlights the contributions of some women in technology. And in this case, I chose Audrey Harvey. How many of you know or knew of Audrey? There's a few of us in the room. She actually started the data acquisition team. She started it well before I did. And she started the data acquisition team, meaning hardware and software at NI, to do data acquisition back in, I don't know, 86 or 87, about the time that LabVIEW started. She retired from NI late 90s, I want to say. Deborah, do you remember this? Late 90s. And then her husband, John Rossford, also used to work at NI. And so they basically bought a big RV and went on the road. And she's done a lot of photography for some of the state parks in Texas. So I haven't actually talked to her in a few years, but she seemed like a good candidate. She was a great role model. I think she's one of the reasons that NI has always, her starting things has kind of created an environment that is good for women in engineering at NI. So it's a piece of that puzzle. Okay, so next up, I want to learn a little bit about those of you in the audience. So this is where we get to try out. You can either go to this URL at the top, foleyb.com/bhpowell, or you can do it through text message. And tell me a little bit about what you do, just so I know the audience I'm speaking to. Interesting how these numbers are changing.
Master people are Z.
Everybody figuring it out? Anybody having trouble with it? Yeah, but we're gonna have a few more later on that are deep, interesting. Okay, that's kind of what I expected. I spent, obviously early part of my career doing A, and now I do C. But that gives me a good idea. Okay. Let's see. And then, oh yeah, here's another background question. How many LabVIEW programmers work at your company? That's also interesting. This actually skews towards larger teams than I expected it to skew. I expected there to be a lot more of really small teams. You're the heroic LabVIEW team that's trying to do everything in a larger group. But it's great to see larger teams like this. Okay. So first I want to. There's some things. I'm an old geezer.
Experience.
I'm an old geezer.
Experience, old geezer.
Yeah, I like to say that I'm, or Mercer, Stephen, you like to say that I'm one of the weird uncles of LabVIEW, so I'm pretty happy. So over time, there's some things that I just have very strongly believe, and so I just want to put those out there as like, this presentation has these assumptions of, this is what I believe, and so this is what I'm going to talk about. And so I believe that the right way to build a good product is to build a good engineering team. I have seen it done other ways, especially the last year or two. And so I think that's really important, so I'm going to talk some about that. The best way to retain employees is to give them freedom to grow. I've also seen, one of the reasons I stayed at NI 26 years is like every couple of years I would decide whether I wanted to reinvent myself in some way, and sometimes the answer was no, it was keep doing the same job, and sometimes it was go a different direction. It was sometimes I want to manage people, then it was I want to stop managing people, and then it was I wanted to work on 64-bit LabVIEW or LabVIEW robotics or the field architects. Being able to change what I did every couple of years really is one of the things that retained me for as long as it did. And then also the pragmatic, every person in every situation is different, and so there's not a silver bullet. So you'll see these in the rest of my presentation. Okay. Sarah, talked about the ideal, but for you, what is your world like here? Yeah, this is, so it's great to see what I think is the ideal of like constantly looking for ways to refactor is something you get to do. I just came from a site a couple of weeks ago that was very much in the B category of, they're under time pressure, we don't really have time to work on this, but the group working on the code realized that we needed to fix some things. And so we spent the time to fix things, and we just, I think probably we all believed that we would go faster by fixing things than leaving them broken, but, we didn't really go to the boss and ask permission. It was more like, what can we do without the customer that was on site knowing, and then the boss really putting pressure on. Okay. Yeah, so actually, I wanted to talk about this. So this is I was working at this place a few weeks ago, and it's a typical LabVIEW real-time data acquisition. And they were kind of they were using version 2 of their software, which was more flexible than the first version they wrote, but still not really done right. And so it still had a lot of problems, but it was like better than, it wasn't crap. It was usable. But the guy who wrote it left. That was another theme from Sarah's presentation. The guy who wrote it left. And then the backup was on long-term medical leave. So they borrowed a resource from another site. I came in, helped, brought in another person or two. And so I talked to one of the guys, he was the borrowed guy from another site, and he, is okay at LabVIEW. I think he has a CLA. And, he very much feels like, I wish I had the time to go work on my CLD. I wish I had time to learn LabVIEW more. He, and I haven't really programmed LabVIEW in 5 years in any great depth, so I don't really consider myself the Darren Nattinger fastest LabVIEW programmer in the world. But he says, Brian, you program like 15 times faster than I do. And it's an exaggeration, but it's just like, he's not in that world to be able to make these decisions about improving himself. And so he's asked for, please let me have time to improve my LabVIEW skills. And his boss like, well, as soon as this current project is over, right? Because we're behind schedule on it. And that never happens, right? He never got through that project, because then there was the next project, and then there was the next project, and so there was never the time to improve his skills. And so then you end up with people working on the code base that aren't, are somewhere between CLAD and CLD competent. And so that's this vicious cycle that you end up with that can cause these, technical debt problems, that we talked about earlier. So how many of this does that resonate? Yeah, half of the room isn't raising their hand. Hello. There we go.
This looks like a great presentation for the Leadership Forum. And we just
Great presentation for the Leadership Forum in NIV. Good comment. Okay, so there's this book called Peopleware. I think I wrote it I read it when it came out new back in the 90s. Steve Watts, those of you who know Steve Watts, he's talked about this book. I recently reread this book a couple months ago, and it's just like, it just described a lot about my people management philosophy and software. One of the quotes, I've got a few quotes in here from this book. The decision to pressure people into delivering a product that doesn't measure up to their own quality standards is almost always a mistake. And so, I think I talked about it on this. So, this is the startup that I worked at up until March of this year, the Zebra. It was a interesting startup. We had a barista. who's the receptionist, but she also made coffee. It was a pretty cool place to work. But one of the things, like they were doing this mobile revamp of the mobile website to make it easier to use. And there was all this pressure to like, oh, you know, we need to get this out as soon as possible. There's a lot of cyclical buying in the insurance. And so it's kind of interesting that there's all this pressure of time. And what we ended up having to do is we had to cut features, we had to cut corners on the software in order to meet the schedule. How does that sound familiar to anybody? And so one of my lead developers, who actually used to work at NI, said, you know, he basically told me, you know, like, I don't really want my name associated with this product. Right? Because it was like, he is not proud of the work that his team had to do in order to meet the schedule, right? And so, and he was a tech lead, right? So he's like one of the leaders in this organization, and he's saying that. And it's just like, you know, it really hit home for me of like, you know, if that's how the developers feel, we're not going to keep them very long, right? They're going to go somewhere else where they don't feel like they are under these constraints like this. So I really think that whole idea of paying attention to the developers' quality standards is and letting them meet that, giving them the freedom to meet that. I don't know that I have this in this presentation, but there was another quote from this book about, because at the Zebra we had this COO who was a founder, and he's like, you know, we need to do this in the next 2 weeks. If we can't do it in the next 2 weeks, it's not worth doing. And we said, great, it'll take a month, so we're not going to do it. He said, wait. That's not what I meant. And so in the book, they talk about, well, what that really means when he said that is that this project is only worth investing 2 weeks in, right? So then it's like, well, do you really want us to put out something crappy that doesn't really work very well in 2 weeks? Because we can do that. But we're not just going to do it and then commit to another 6 weeks of fixing it, right? And so getting some clarity on, you know, like how important is this and what are the trade-offs? What are the company really willing to invest in these things is, you know, another piece of this puzzle. And we tried to be very clear of like this mobile revamp of the website is going to take this amount of effort, but then there was still, you know, here's how long it's going to take, and we were told to do it in this amount of time, and so that's where that frustration came from. Okay, autonomy. The only freedom that has any meaning is the freedom to proceed differently from the way your manager would have proceeded. And I think that's an excellent quote. You know, I think, yeah, so I'll let you finish reading that. And the next place, or the next, yeah, I'll get to it. So I worked at Athena Health, phenomenal company for the first 2 years I worked there. And then they hired a new CTO, had great vision but terrible execution, and one of the things he took away was a lot of autonomy. So I'm actually gonna talk some about that in a moment. Okay. Describe traits of the best boss you've ever had. Be words or phrases or...
Good hand. That's the biggest one.
I've never seen this at work like this. This is pretty cool. Because when you're testing, you're just doing a few words at a time. Yeah. George, Sam. Okay, awesome. So let's see, trust and trusting, understanding, autonomy, accountable. It's also interesting to see how some of these phrases get mixed up into RAIN. Respect, kind, supportive, empowering, understanding, considerate. Okay. Good. Okay. We'll stop here. Okay. Now for the fun one. We're going to move on. Describe traits of the worst boss you've ever had.
Do we have? I don't think we have enough.
The font's going to get really small. Machiavelli.
Yeah, nice.
Micromanager is still in the lead. Liar. Wow. Idiot. Mansplaining. Okay, that's good. We could go on, but. Thank you for your honesty. So back to the CTO that worked for. So Athena Health was a similar in size to I thought $1.2 billion company, 6,000 some employees, of which 1,200 were in engineering. And so there was this pressure to push on methodology. The CTO came from a small startup. Well, actually, he came from Salesforce.com, but he was part of a small startup that got bought by Salesforce.com, and then became CTO of this healthcare company. So his experience with managing a group of, 12 people or so, right? The way you manage a team of 1,000 people is very different than the way you manage a team of 12 people. And so, but methodologies was one of those things that he pushed on. Everybody should do things the same way. So we did an agile transformation, and that took 6 months. Nothing he did moved quickly. So, and there are, to be honest with you, to be clear, there are real benefits to everybody doing things the same way. So I don't mean to belittle that idea, but it's not so much about the methodology, it's that you get people actually lined up and moving in the same direction. And so the problem is that this last thing, methodologies seek to force convergence through statute. And so this CTO, this is the Austin office of Athena Health. It's down on Cedar Chaga. It's a really cool building. It's an old power plant built in the 1950s. Big concrete box. Big bridge crane overhead from which we hung the disco ball. And when the light comes in these windows, it hits the disco ball and it's disco hour. Anyway, so examples of the lack of autonomy or the autonomy we lost. We were suddenly told in this team of 1,000 engineers, there will be scrum teams, and each scrum team shall consist of 3 developers. Exactly 3 developers, right? And it's just like, really? I've got a team of 5 that's working just fine, thank you, so leave us alone, kind of stuff. he, I'm trying to think of some of the other things he did like that, you know, basically a whole lot of process. He added a whole lot of process. I mean, and like I said, he had some great vision. We had a giant monolith of, it was like 4 applications in one. It's believed to be the largest Perl program ever written of, you know, like 12 million lines of code. And, you know, his vision was, oh, rebuild it in terms of microservices. But in 2 years' time, he hadn't delivered anything in production yet. You know, we're still always in this mode of the pure methodologies that everybody should be following. And another one was to be a Scrum Master, you had to have a certain seniority and title. And I had perfectly fine Scrum Masters who were new to the company who didn't have that title. So this is, you know, that's an example of where, like, we were fighting, we're spending so much energy dealing with the methodologies that we weren't really making progress on improving healthcare and delivering a better product and building microservices and things like that. And so that's another piece where it's like, you should, I believe, you know, give a whole lot of autonomy to your teams, and then, you know, let them solve the problem. Let them, you know, here's the, you know, if they just come to us and say, hey, we think this vision of moving to microservices is a good idea, and then gave us the freedom to just go run do that, we would have made a whole lot more progress than what we actually did. Reason I left this company is because, well, their revenue went flat, and then an activist investor took hold, and the place just kind of imploded. You know, went from one of the best cultures I'd ever worked with one of the worst, where we're just all waiting for the layoffs, and so then they had big layoffs, and I moved on to that startup. So, like I said, methodologies aren't entirely bad, but I think that these ideas, which also come from that Peopleware book, are a better way to do it. So one, train the people so that they're confident. You know, like the Agile training was great. You know, I learned what formal Agile meant. Which it had taken 6 months to roll out across the company. But still. Tools. So rather than, you know, here is how you will write software, instead just give us tools for easy deployment, easy testing, easy, you know, common architectures, things like that. If you just given us the tools, we would have, like, chosen the easy path to use those tools, and that would have caused more convergence. And then peer review. This is one of the things that, you know, I thought E&I has always done especially well, is like all the LabVIEW code is peer reviewed, code reviewed, before it goes into the source code control system. And I think that's a great way of learning for new people. It's a great way of ensuring quality, or trying to ensure quality. And I think that also encourages, that's how you learn the process. You learn what's good and what's bad from your peers that are reviewing your code. So I think this is a better way than just the statute that I faced at Health. And then, you know, this is one of the, just when I read this in the book, it's like, this made me stop and think, right? So, you know, you can spend all your time teaching your employees about, you know, good culture and good practices and good software engineering, but if they leave, and then you've got to keep training that, then your organization is not really getting any better. It's just trying to stay afloat. And so, like at this company I was working at a couple of weeks ago, where you know, like that software really could have benefited from LabVIEW classes, like a re-architecture to use, not even a re-architecture, like a, you know, refactoring to add LabVIEW classes and consolidate some information together, some nice encapsulation. But they don't have anybody who understands LabVIEW classes. And so I didn't want to go in and rewrite their code to where they could no longer maintain it. So I wasn't going to add LabVIEW classes. But that's an example of, well, if they'd invested in their people enough to where that their people were competent enough to use LabVIEW classes, we could have fixed the software and kept moving forward and improved things. But we weren't in that situation. They didn't have, you know, their main LabVIEW developer left. The other one is out. The third one was borrowed. So the investment in people needs to wait until they stabilize their employment situation. And then once we invest in people, figure out how to retain those people, because if you just teach them and then they leave, then you are wasting your energy. So, last slide before I open it up for questions is just a reminder, these are the things that I believe. I think that you need to build a good engineering team if you want to build good software. You need to invest in the people, and you also need to retain them. You need to give them the freedom to do that they'll want to stay, and then every situation is different. So, does this resonate with people? Does anybody feel like they work in a place that does this really well? Yeah, where is that?
Our DSA, our actual 1 year goal this year was investing in our employees. So last
Say that again.
Sure thing.
That's worth.
So I'm at DSA out of Pittsburgh, and one of our 5 goals for this year, I mean, that's as high as revenue and, customers and everything like that, was investing in our employees. And I personally run a internal training class where I run these kind of things on a regular basis so that we say that that's at the same level as the projects, so projects don't push down. So.
Does it work?
So far.
Who else feels like they're a good example?
Okay. Yeah. So Alfred Harris, Salt Lake City. We have an onboarding program that we believe very heavily in. We started out with around 80 developers. We're down to 15 high-quality developers maintaining more code and outputting more things. A lot of CLAs. I think we have 10 CLAs and like 12 CPAs. So yeah, works really well.
So would you say that it saves you money?
Lots of money.
The L3 money, not you personally. And then do people have counterexamples where things don't work well and it's costing the company that they're willing to share?
I first met Nancy when I worked at a company, and at that time they had 5 CLAs, and now they have absolutely 0. And they went from like, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 people doing LabVIEW down to like 1. So they definitely do not believe in training or building people up and those type of things.
So did they get rid of those people, or did they people just leave on their own?
They all left on their own.
This one over here.
I seem to observe program management. Those who are up for the money to disperse the programs don't realize how much of engineering is necessary rather than, say, schedule management or, and so don't value engineering as a whole. And for that matter, software engineering seems to be even smaller. And I don't know if that's because they don't have the technical understanding, or they see themselves as maybe more important because they're the ones who interface with the customer. So of course they need their big slice of the pie, and engineering gets 20% or.
Yeah, that's an interesting. At Athena Health, when we got this new CTO, one of the things that we felt, I don't know if he actually ever said this, but the way we felt is that all 1,000 developers are what we call fungible resources. Like, here's a guy who's an expert on databases, but, we need him in this role where he's doing front-end JavaScript development. And so he's pissed off. That's not what he wants to be doing. Because one, he's not very good at it. He knows he's not very good at it, so he gets frustrated. But it's like, there's plenty of work to be doing on improving database stuff too. And so why not let him, there's need, why not let him do that? And I think that, that the program manager that just thinks of, there are these resources, you know, I have 200 resources in this room, and therefore I can solve all the problems with these resources. You will work on database, you will work on front end, you will work on back end, you know, so on. And that's not how it works. Right? Take the microphone.
To add to that point that you just made, a lot of times when you put people in that situation where you ask them to fulfill a job they're not really interested in, then they become the expert in that field, even though that might not be what they want to be an expert in. And then you kind of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think sometimes you end up driving people out of your company because you say, well, we really want to work on this project over here, but right now we need to get this done, which is a fair business case. But then it ends up being, oh, you know how to do that now, so we're gonna kind of push you in that direction more and more. And sometimes you end up kind of pushing people out of the company as a result of that, even though they might be saying, well, I really want to kind of head in this direction, but you already know how to do this, so let's work on this.
Yep. There's a guy who used to work for me in Athena called Clifton, no last name. Clifton was an angry man. But that Clifton is the person who found out, we had these what we call timeout rooms where you could go and you just go sit and be quiet, and we found out that those rooms aren't soundproofed. He was doing a little primal scream therapy on his own, so he's venting.
That's because somebody was screwing up his database.
I'll get to you the next.
In terms of organizations that don't build up their people, I worked for a company for 5 years that thought of themselves as being really smart, but they really didn't do anything proactive to build up their people. And I say this for the benefit of mostly the younger developers and the architects. Don't underestimate your ability to advocate for yourself in an environment like that and seek out, well, probably not certifications, but training and opportunities to improve. And at some point, you might then just realize that you have new doors open to you at a better organization. So if you are working for a place that sucks, leaving is not always necessary.
Yep, that's a really good point. The other thing I will advocate for is that some of you are manage people, some of you will become managers, and I think being open to those ideas and being willing to listen and work with people to improve the situation is vital. You know, I mentioned the developer I had that says, I'm not proud to put my name on this app. I really, really appreciated that he had the trust and confidence in me to be able to tell me that. Right? He didn't see me as management that was telling him he had to deliver this feature, you know, in the schedule or else. So, yeah. Okay.
I just had a quick one-liner from my former boss. We'll hire the people after we've won the project.
Yeah, that's that. You know, hiring people after, you know, that's part of the fungible resource thing, right? Of just like, I'd rather have an engineering team that knew what we were good at and what we were capable of before we decided how much money we're going to ask for to implement a product. Yeah, one or two, a couple more.
So one quote I saw recently that really stuck with me. One manager looks at another and says, well, what happens if we train everybody and they leave? And another one says, what happens if we don't and they stay? That was really stuck with me.
Yeah, I forget where I saw that one, but absolutely.
Well, I also think sometimes companies have their hiring priorities wrong. They hire for stuff that they can train. So they're hiring people because they're CLA level or whatever. But really what you want, and I think Fab will agree with this because I'm here to say, you want the team player, right? You want somebody who's like willing to learn and grow and, you know, willing to adapt and work with other people.
That's on my consulting company's marketing slide. Is, you know, at no place that I have worked did we interview people based on the skills that you have. Every place I have worked, the thought process is we're going to interview for and hire smart people, and we're going to teach them the things they need to know to be successful in our organization. So like at Athena Health, turns out that there's not a whole lot of people who are interested in working on the world's largest Perl program. Because that was a great technology to use sometime in the mid-90s for your website. And so, you know, it's silly for us to go out and try to recruit the greatest Perl programmers in the world and bring them to Athena. Instead it was, let's sell them on the social mission of improving healthcare. And, you know, are you a good software developer? Are you smart? Are you willing to learn? Great, here's our code. You know, and people were willing to do that. And I was willing to do that. I wrote my share of Perl code at that company. And this, same with LabVIEW skills, right? It's like I talk to a lot of people who say, oh, I have a really hard time hiring LabVIEW programmers. I can't seem to find enough of them or enough competent LabVIEW programmers. And it's like, well, if you just tried to hire smart people and teach them LabVIEW, there's nobody at NI, well, almost nobody at NI was hired as a LabVIEW expert, right? Norm is an exception. But, you really teach people that. Fabio.
Yeah, there's a book I have mentioned before. It's called Joy Inc. And one of the things that the author says is that you have to hire people that already have the kindergarten skills, because those are the things that you cannot teach. If somebody doesn't come with the let's share, listen when you need to listen, you know, have conflict resolution on the playground, so those things you cannot teach. Those are things that people have to have. LabVIEW, you can teach them. So you have to figure out what your culture is and define that culture and hire people that fit in that culture, especially if you're a small team. Because when you're a team of 2 or 3 people, adding one person that doesn't fit into the culture kills the culture.
Yep. So first thought is like nap time, is that included?
Yes.
No biting.
No biting.
But how many people have had individuals that are toxic to the organization? Right? That's half of the audience raised their hand, right? And you need to deal with that. If you're a manager, if you're a director or VP of engineering, you need to deal with that. Believe me, you need to deal with it now. Because it isn't just a bad employee, it's a bad employee that's corrupting the entire team. And it's polluting ideas, it is creating at best a bad work environment, even a hostile work environment. So you really do need to address those things. And some of it is, you know, it doesn't mean you have to fire the person, maybe it's just you need to get them to stop doing what they're doing and teach them the kindergarten skills. But you do need to address it. Did I see a hand over here? Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to have you bring very valuable points about interviewing people for positions, but that goes a little bit further as you promote people, that you hire smart people. Oftentimes, the wrong people get promoted, you know, the smart people don't because they do a job of 2, 3 people and you want them to be an individual guy, but they lack the vision and the ability to improve the team as a whole, if they're promoted as a technical leader or manager. Yet, you know, so that's another point to look at, you know, not just bring in talent, but promote it as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point of, and just in general, reward at your organization, right? Whether it's promotion, whether it's raises and stuff like that. You got to figure out what are the things that you actually value, and make sure that you aren't rewarding people for something different. So for example, do I keep promoting somebody who is very, very prolific, but you know, maybe isn't a good team player? You know, maybe they're not a good mentor to others. One of the things I did at, well, both Athena and the Zebra is create a career chart of, you know, here are different titles and here's what it means to be at each level. Like at the Zebra, we did not have one before. It was just, you know, it's kind of ad hoc my boss, who is nearly a founder, just kind of had in his head what it means to be a senior engineer or different titles. And so I started writing things down, and it's not just about how many lines of code you write, but I had a whole column about community. Like, what are you doing for the company's developer community? And so are you a good mentor? Are you paying attention or participating in code reviews? Are you kind of trying to improve the quality of the entire development team, not just what you're doing? And that's a really important thing for me for especially what we call staff engineers and senior engineers, and in those higher level titles. Taking it a step further, another thing I did is I believe at a certain level that there's an obligation to have that influence outside of your organization as well, right? Like, come to the CLA Summit and share your knowledge, or share with a local LabVIEW user group, or things like that. I think that there's an obligation as you grow in your career to have that impact too, not just within your company. Okay. Any other final comments? Awesome. Thank you very much. I hope this was interesting and helpful. You take the time.